Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the truth if your ex ever loved you. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing the truth if your ex ever loved you. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will likely wonder about your ex's feelings, past, present, and future. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 points to consider about the truth if your ex ever loved you. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is think back to 5 months. So if you're thinking to yourself, I've been dumped, it was brutal, I'm now starting to question whether my now former partner ever loved me. I'm starting to wonder, did they ever love me at all? Because if they did, how could they treat me as they now have? Well, I would ask you to do this, dumpees. Think back to when you and your now former partner were together for around 5 months. So think back to that stage of your relationship. Maybe that was a long time ago. Maybe it wasn't really that long ago that it was 5 months. I want you to think back to that period of time, work out when it would have been, and then consider how life was between you at that point. Now, there is a reason why I'm asking you to do such a random task. And that is because from research, that is the average amount of time it takes people to fall in love. Now, it's not an exact science. It's not going to specifically mean bang on 5 months was the time that you and your now ex were falling in love with one another, but it is a good average through research. And interestingly enough, the research actually showed that men tended to fall in love a little sooner than women did. But the average altogether is around 5 months. So the reason why I'm asking you to think back then is if you're questioning whether or not your ex ever loved you, the time to really try and think about this is 5 months and beyond. But if we don't really know when, unfortunately, they started to fall out of love with you, we need to be trying to think of the likely point where they was feeling their most heightened feelings. Now, again, it's not an exact science. Your situation is unique. Their most heightened feelings may have been beyond 5 months. But because I don't know when I'm speaking to you in this generalized podcast, I don't know when your breakup occurred. I don't know when they started to lose romantic emotional attraction. We need to try and find a point to really focus on as a likely time that both of you were going to be feeling the highest level of attraction towards one another. And I would suggest 5 months, 6 months, that is going to give you that likely point in time where both of you were falling in love with one another, where both of you were in love with one another. And this is where we can really answer that question. Did my ex ever love me? Well, think back to that 5-6 month point. Did you feel the love then? Did you share wonderful times together? Did you have great experiences? Do you have evidence, maybe that you can look back at your old texts, your old emails, videos, photos, whatever it may be? Can you look back to that time and see how your ex was treating you back then, listening to what they said, but not just the words, because, actions speak louder than words, but the words do combine with how they are perhaps treating you at that moment. So, yes, we need to be looking at the actions more than the words, but often the words are accompanied by an action, and you can hopefully remember by looking back to that time exactly how you were being treated, exactly how much care, attention, and most importantly, love was being shown to you from your now ex. If you feel that there were moments during that time where you were really feeling that love, then you're answering your question to some regard when we're asking ourselves, did our ex ever love us? Did they ever love me? Well, if you can remember back then times where they showcased love, then the answer is yes. They did love you. It doesn't mean they love you now, unfortunately, in a romantic way, but it does mean that they loved you at some point. And they likely loved you for a longer period of time than you are believing right now. You're going through a horrible experience. Feelings such as a combination of grief and drug withdrawal are flowing through your mind. This is not easy. You are looking and living through a clouded mindset. But don't let that cloud the reality of what happened. We're talking about today the truth of if your ex ever loved you. Try to think back to that 5-6 month point, the time where they were most likely to have been in love with you, and whether or not you did feel that love. If you did, then of course it's a wonderful sign that they did love you. But if you are a bit unsure, well, okay, keep listening through today's podcast, where we're going to be speaking about other points to consider to try and definitively answer the question of the truth of if your ex ever loved you. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and if you have the new hype feature, please hype this video as well. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel to keep updated. And point number 2 is what caused the breakup. Now, of course, it's really important to consider what caused your breakup. Now, some of you might not know. Some of you might be confused. Some of you might feel blindsided. But you can try and pinpoint moments where things started to go downhill. Maybe you don't know exactly, but you should hopefully be able to tell moments where your now ex-dumper started to change how they spoke to you, treated you, and maybe even looked at you, okay? If you can pinpoint those moments, we can start to piece together the reasoning and rationale as for why, unfortunately, they actioned the breakup. Now, we have to be honest with ourselves. There are going to be things which happened which caused this to take place. Now, am I blaming you for everything? No, I'm not. Okay, I don't know your specifics, but the likelihood is this is a combination of things you did and said and a combination of things that they did and said. There's a combination likely happening of why they lost romantic emotional attraction. But that is the bigger point. They did lose it. Somebody doesn't end a relationship unless they lose romantic emotional attraction. And when it hits the necessary low point, that is when they action the breakup. Now, if you, for instance, cheated on your now former partner, they would have lost that attraction very suddenly. They may have been completely in love with you up until that point they found out you cheated on them. And at that stage, they lost the attraction very, very quickly and actioned the breakup. Now, if you cheated on your now former partner and they dumped you, as terrible as that is, it does hopefully answer the question a little clearer, perhaps, about whether or not they ever loved you. The likelihood is that they did. The likelihood is that they did love you, but they dumped you due to the fact of how you treated them by cheating on them. Now, I know things aren't always black and white. Maybe you cheated on your now former partner because you didn't feel the love from them, and you were seeking that from somewhere else. Of course, that is very, very different. There are many different shades of this experience that we have to consider, and this is why my podcasts have to be generalized, because I'm speaking to all of you. But I understand the unique specifics in each element. So depending on whether you feel that you did an action to cause your breakup and that your former partner, when you actually consider it, really did love you before, but they've dumped you suddenly due to that, that is clearer that they did love you at one time. And more importantly, they probably do still love you, but there is all this trauma which is now on top of that love, which is covering it, which is masking it. And hopefully for you, dumpees, if you want your ex back, you will be able to slowly but surely find your ex through this mask of pain that they are now covered in, and they will love you again in the future. But that would be up to them. And if this example is accurate for you, you've got to understand how much wrong you have done. And there is no guarantee they will ever want you back. But just to say, I've found through my many years of experience that people who dump someone because they were cheated on, well, they often feel that love, and it's not too much beneath the surface of the pain, it's just been masked by everything which has happened. So ironically enough, you might find that love from your former partner sooner than in other instances where someone has been dumped and they didn't really do anything as bad as that. They didn't cheat on their partner, but unfortunately they drifted apart. There was complacency. Maybe other potential things came into play, but they never cheated on their partner, and yet they were dumped. And in those instances, sometimes the love can be harder to find and see and grow in the future, because in this regard, the dumper has lost the romantic emotional attraction slowly over time. And when it got to the point where they actioned the breakup, they checked out months ago. under that mask of pain, so to speak, we can't really see the love. It is really, really buried deep down, if anything is left at all. This could be much more difficult to find. And maybe you are questioning, did my ex ever love me? I may have been complacent, but that's because I got nothing back from them during the relationship. These are the intricacies, but we need to consider what caused the breakup, or at least to our best ability to try and work this out. Because if we can figure out exactly why they lost romantic emotional attraction, we can try and understand how much of that attraction they ever had in the first place. It's not easy to do. Sometimes you might need to ask friends, family, maybe you want to speak with myself via my audio coaching service, and we can try and uncover this together. But if you can get to the bottom of what went wrong, well, you can often see things a lot more clearly. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is their last words: don't relate. Now, dumpees will often say to me, I believe my ex never loved me at all. And I know this because when they dumped me, they told me that. They said, you know what, I never loved you. We will never be together. I never cared for you like you did me. And all of these horrible things that a dumper might potentially say at the time of a breakup. But it's really important to remember that their last words don't relate. They don't relate to the concept of whether or not they ever loved you. Now, remember what I said earlier. Someone only ends a relationship if they've lost romantic emotional attraction, if that attraction has dropped to the necessary low point. So if they've ended a relationship, this level of attraction is very, very low, if it exists even at all right now. So when they're speaking at the time of a breakup, they're speaking from a low level of attraction. They're not speaking from the height. They're not speaking from that moment 5 or 6 months in that we mentioned earlier on today. They're speaking at the end of the line. And therefore, what they are saying doesn't relate to whether or not they ever loved you. So even if they say to you, I never loved you, I never cared, I never wanted to be with you, this is being said from a low level of attraction. It's not being said from a high point. So I'm not saying that you should ignore what your ex is saying, but I'm just saying consider whether it relates or not. And in that regard, it doesn't. Now, if, for instance, in the same breakup conversation, your ex will say to you, I don't want you to contact me, okay? Now, I'm not saying ignore that. You need to be using your common sense. They are speaking in the moment, and that means right now, they don't want you to contact them. That is accurate. They're speaking in the moment. That is right now how they feel. But I'm saying is if they're telling you they never loved you, you've got to remember that they're not speaking at the moment of where they may have loved you and where they probably loved you. And that is the overriding theme of today's podcast when I'm speaking about when people ask me, did my ex ever love me? Now, what is the truth? Well, I would say for you two to be in a loving relationship, the key word there is loving. Why would you and your now former partner have got into a committed relationship unless there was love there? Now, we're not speaking about friends with benefits. If you're thinking to yourself, well, yes, I was with someone, it was friends with benefits, if I'm honest, I don't really know if they loved me. Well, if that was the case, they may not have loved you. What we're speaking about here is if you and your former partner were in a committed relationship, an exclusive relationship, a relationship where you two both knew it was you two and only you two. If that is the case, why would anyone get into that unless they felt love? Now, most people will only commit and become exclusive when they are feeling in love or certainly becoming that way. They're starting to fall in love, if not actually be in love. Why would you have committed to that? Think back to your own moment when you decided to be in a committed relationship with this person? Why did you do it? Well, the likelihood is you were in love. The likelihood is that they were also in love when they made that decision. It doesn't matter who brought it up, who asked who tried to make you both exclusive, who made yourself Facebook official, or whatever you want to say. Both of you would have to have agreed. And you would only likely do this if you were comfortable with not dating anyone else. If you wanted to play the field, if you wanted to see other people, you wouldn't have committed to this relationship. And therefore, what we can see is there must have been love, or at least in a logical sense. There is no 100% guaranteed way to read someone's mind, but what we can say is look at the evidence. Why would they have agreed to the commitment unless they felt love? And therefore, if you're asking yourself, did my ex ever love me? If they've dumped me in a brutal way, they're being really cruel, I don't feel the love right now. Well, this is right now, but we're talking ever. And the likelihood is, yes, they loved you. And remember that their last words don't relate. Words spoke to you when they didn't love you doesn't count about if they ever loved you. And even if they don't love you right now, even if you think, okay, maybe they loved me, but they certainly don't now, I will never get them back. Well, listen, feelings change, feelings evolve. Once they loved you, we've already established that. Right now, they probably don't, unfortunately, but we've seen a transition from loving you to not loving you. So why can't that go back up again? Why can't that transition once more? You've already seen somebody who told you potentially they loved you, and now they're telling you that they don't love you. Well, we can change that once more for them to love you again. And although there is no guaranteed way to get an ex back, and I don't want to give you false hope, there is possibility that one day you could reconnect.